Did you know that during the development of Shadow of the Colossus, many of the Colossi changed sizes? We actually have the precise numbers of how the Colossi are scaled by the game. You see, if you extract the Colossi models from the game, you'll notice that some aren't accurate in scale to how they look in game. This is because when resizing Colossi, Team Eco opted not to bake the changes into the actual models. Rather, they instead tell the game to scale the models by a certain scale factor. So let's dive in and compare the Colossi to their original sizes. I'll also throw in some theories as to why they were scaled the way they were. Minotaur A is not scaled by the game and is the original size of its model. Judging by a development screenshot, its model was pretty much always the same, barring a few small changes when its strategy changed. Like Minotaur A, Mammoth's current model is not scaled by the game. Notice I said current model since we know factually it had one other model, known as Boss A, and an earlier version of the current one with the scary face. These earlier models, especially the Boss A one, may have been different sizes, but it's unlikely. Knight also did not change scale. Its model has always pretty much been the same, except for a few small details. Technically it used to be taller because of its cute hat that they got rid of. Kirin is the first Colossus that the game applies a scale factor to, and it's quite interesting. Kirin is a pretty small Colossus, especially compared to the other large quadrupeds, so it may be surprising to you that it's actually 1.5 times bigger than its original size. It's actually quite shocking how small Kirin used to be, but I can explain why its size was changed. Kirin used to be a very different fight than it is now. Not only was it smaller, it also had a beard. In fact, it was probably the Colossi they developed beard physics for in the first place. Kirin's Hill, its arena, was also very different, as shown in these clips from the Nico production reel, and some gorgeous design art by director Fumito Ueda. The player likely climbed the little hill structures and jumped onto Kirin's beard when it came close. When its strategy was changed, they could afford to make it bigger, possibly to help it climb around the new focal point of its arena. We can also see bearded Kirin as drawn by Ueda and as the shadow model in the E3 demo. Bird is our first Colossus that was made smaller than its original size, and it's by quite a lot. Bird is actually half the size it used to be. There's not much I can say about this other than the fact that this change probably happened pretty early in development, and it's likely that this early bird design we see in the production reel is the original size. Sadly, nothing about Bird's early incarnation is known strategy-wise. My only real guess for scaling it down might be camera issues posed by the larger wings, but I'm not sure. Minotaur B is scaled 1.25 times its original size, making it the largest of the three Minotaurs. This is 100% because it's a modified Minotaur A and they changed the size to make them more unique. Eel used to be quite surprising to me, as it used to be absolutely massive. Its current incarnation is a mere 0.45 times the size of its original design, which I cannot stress enough was huge. I don't know why it got scaled down, but my best guess is memory issues. Eel is one of the few Colossi we know basically nothing about development-wise, so I'm not sure if it had more electric spines in its early incarnation, or if it even had electric spines. I know Eel freaks out a lot of people with a fear of the deep and sea monsters, so I can imagine the earlier design was even worse. One other possible reason it got scaled down is just to fit in its arena, but looking at the lake, it's much bigger than it needs to be, so that might be unlikely. Okay, this is by far the most insane difference. Yamori B is the third smallest Colossus in the game, but its original size would have been one of the biggest. The current Yamori B is a mere quarter of its original size, which rivaled the size of Turtle. The hard question is even knowing why it was shrunk so much or whether Yamori B was truly ever this size. This is because it's likely that Yamori B's model was, like its cart twin Yamori A, modified from the original Yamori model, the latter of which is much more likely to be the massive one. The original size just fundamentally doesn't fit in Yamori B's arena and it's not even close. Turtle, Naga, Leo, and Poseidon all stayed the same. Nothing to say about them other than the fact that Naga likely got a new model when its designer strategy changed, which may be why we don't see any data suggesting it used to be smaller. Next up is Snake Sea, by far the biggest Colossus in the game and it's not even close, although early Eel is somewhat comparable. I imagine it might be shocking then when I say it used to be even goddamn bigger. That's right, the biggest Colossus in the game by far is only 0.85 times its original size. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that this was done blatantly for memory reasons. It's got by far the most open arena, and it would have still easily fit. That being said, I do want to briefly touch a bit on the history of Snake Sea's size and how it relates to the fandom. In the art book, director Fumito Ueda gave the only concrete size for anything in the game using real-world units. He mentioned Snake Sea being 200 meters long. With this newfound knowledge, the community immediately started using Snake Sea as the world's largest ruler, and determined scales on many things in the game. This was all well and good until all of a sudden Wanda was short. Really damn short. This was just a fun bit of trivia in the community for over a decade. The main character and the other humans are very short. Of course, you might suspect something is off, and you would be right. When Ueda made the offhand comment in the art book, he was actually referring to Snake Sea's original size, which actually was approximately 200 meters long. The in-game Snake Sea is actually approximately 170 meters long, and because it was used as a measuring stick, the Snake Sea method incorrectly showed everything in the game as 0.85 times their original size. The human characters are relatively realistically scaled. Aggro is still a massive horse though, and Wanda is relatively short compared to Mono, which I think is really cute. Cerberus, like its small friend Leo, is unchanged. Minotaur C is much like its bigger sibling Minotaur B, a modified and larger Minotaur A. They were both added when Monkey and Griffin were cut. Essentially, Ueda argued that it was easier to develop for the human form, and they are essentially clones, which makes sense. It is 1.175 times the size of Minotaur A, making it the middle sibling in terms of height. Finally, we have Buddha or Evis. It is quite possibly the most interesting case. For those who don't know the full story, the TLDR is that the final boss wasn't always the final boss. It was just a regular Colossus called Buddha, and when the final boss, Evis, was cut because its development started too late, Buddha became the final boss and took the old one's name. Anyways, as you can imagine, becoming the final boss required Buddha to go under a massive strategy change, and as part of that, the boss became bigger. Much bigger. Buddha is twice the size its model was, standing 50 meters tall compared to its earlier incarnation's 25. It makes sense to make the final boss one of the biggest, and Buddha does not disappoint, so I suppose they made the right decision overall. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed and it was fascinating to learn about the original sizes of the Colossi. I'm also really sorry for my enunciation, my voice, and also the audio quality. I'm really sorry about that.